This is one thing that seems to have a good rationale, but I'm reluctant to agree with. The reason is it seems to have a good rationale because, based on my own experiences over the last 2 decades or so, I agree that truly the concept of self esteem in of itself is might be a misguided one. There is so much that goes into the formulation of a human being, the things we know, the things we do, the way we think about ourselves. There's so much that goes into it that that one concept alone may or may not capture the essence of what self-esteem really is, what it means. Well, let's go through Peterson's thoughts here.
I don't think self-esteem exists. I think there were, 25,000 published papers on self-esteem, figure 10 grand a paper, which is, a comparatively conservative estimation. It's like, well, what's self-esteem? It's a word. Actually, it's two words, right? But, and it's sort of something you think you might have or not have, but that's a figure of speech. That's not an empirical phenomenon.
It's a description of something. It's not in of itself a prescription.
Most of extroversion is just neuroticism, as it turns out. It's like if you have a lot of negative emotion, you don't feel that good about yourself. Well, isn't that a surprise? You have a lot of negative emotion. It's like, what makes you think you should have high self-esteem? Like maybe you're a miserable little worm. God only knows, right? It's not the case that you should have a good opinion of yourself in every bloody situation. What if you're a bully who pounds people out in the schoolyard?
People tend to see themselves as this formulation of everything. I think that we are actually different from our emotions, right? And you know this because you can sense your own emotions, you can perceive it. Sometimes you can even see yourself. If you imagine yourself standing outside yourself, you can see yourself reacting to yourself on what you do. This is in fact what makes people feel bad about themselves and what makes them have low self-esteem, using the words we're referring to here. You are not your emotions, you're not even your thoughts, because you can perceive those. You're separate from them. And what usually happens is somebody does something, you do something, and your mind replays that thing to you. And your emotional reaction to that thing is the same emotional reaction you would have had if somebody, a third party, like a friend, told you that they did the same thing. Logically, then, the solution then is if you feel negatively about yourself, chances are what you have done is negative. Chances are that if you change your actions, you can change your emotions, right? And your feeling about yourself. Now, why don't people just do this? Part of it is we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. This is the great limitation of humanity. Many people are moving around in circles because they don't know what they're doing wrong. They can feel that something is going wrong. In fact, they can feel it sometimes because of the results of what they do. The result of your actions. It's not what you'd have wanted, right? People who say they have low self-esteem and so they run away from talking to strangers. There are some things you do or you say and the stranger reacts in a way that you don't want. Reacts in a way that makes you feel bad. And so your reaction to that is then to curl up. Now, the things wrong in that scenario is, number one, your reaction to the reaction of the other party. Because your reaction can actually solve part of the problem. But you don't know that. That's part of the problem. So many times if you fix your reactions, even if your initial attempt was bad or wrong or wasn't socially adept, you can actually solve the problem faster. But you don't know that. But once you realize what you don't know, you actually have the capacity to change your reactions to situations such that you are better able to act, you're better able to react, and because you act better, you feel better about yourself. In regards to the bullies,
by the way, do have higher self-esteem than normal. So because it's not like they're feeling bad about themselves when they pound you, they're feeling bad about you. And the best work, the low self-esteem equals bully hypothesis, lots of people believe that, but if you read Dan Olweus, who's the world's leading authority on bullying and who's actually done something about it, what he says is that bullies have inappropriately high self-esteem, which is why they think they're in a perfectly good position to pound you out if you happen to be on the playground.
The bully knows one way to react to a situation that makes them feel less. If I use the example of a bully who bullies a smaller kid for being smart, and maybe the bully isn't as smart, well, what's your reaction when somebody is better than you in something? If you're not stronger than the person, your reaction is simply to retreat or to let the person have the limelight. If you're better and you have learned violence, you've seen it pay off, then what do? You assert your violence to bring the person down and to shut them up. Is that high self-esteem? I don't think so. I think it's more pride or arrogance. ego. The younger person, the smaller person, doesn't have the same strength that you do. So you are able to use your strength to suppress them just because you can.
Who claims that all that self-esteem training has just, made younger people like you guys more narcissistic. Yeah, because the self-esteem becomes disconnected from the actual accomplishment. Because you might hope, well, you'd sort of feel good. How good should you feel about yourself?
A lot of joy comes from fulfillment, comes from feeling of competence, and you ride through the ups and downs and it comes from also your reactions to certain things, and you're able to ride that wave up and down because you feel that confidence, you feel that fulfillment, you feel that competence, and you're able to handle things as they're going. If you don't, then you won't have joy, and so your happiness goes down.
Well, you might say, well, you should grant yourself the right to exist like you do everyone else. That's sort of like a basic human right. As a human being, you're valuable.
While we tend to judge ourselves as part of a group.
And then maybe you should sort of think you're about as valuable as other people roughly think you are. That seems about right? So the right amount of self-esteem would be your perception of your value within the context of a group.
Judging yourself in terms of your value to the group is more natural than it is sound, meaning something you should aspire for. When you're within any kind of group, whether it's friends or just family or anything else, you tend to see yourself as part of them and you value yourself accordingly. Sometimes that's good, meaning that you get that feedback. And I think this is where the important part of this is you get feedback from your group as to what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
It's got to be something like that. So there should be a concordance, because like maybe you need to improve, could well be, And are you going to improve if you're feeling really good about yourself?
The idea then is you take that feedback, and initially it may hurt your self-esteem. Well, you're doing things bad, you're not doing things competently, so you won't feel so good about yourself. And that's okay. Again, emotion is simply a thermometer. It's supposed to tell you what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. It's supposed to help you adjust. It's like nerve endings. Are nerve endings good or bad? I'll say in total they're good, because without knowing you have a cut on your foot, for instance, you could bleed out. If you don't know that you've been bitten by a snake, you could die of poison. But if you know all these things, you can react accordingly to them. Your emotions are simply the nerve endings of your inner being, to use that word. You feel your reactions to others and your reactions to yourself as well. And this is why judging yourself, now, let me not use the word judging, condemning yourself is a futile action. Because if you condemn yourself, well, the truth is what you're feeling bad about, that thing you're feeling incompetent about, you're just incompetent at it. You don't know, by definition. So you learn that thing. If you can learn the solution to the issues holding you back, then you can move forward. You can become better.